Hey, all you wanderlusters and hometown heroes. This is Remain, Roam, Return, a podcast that pits your hometown lifestyle against the allure of far-off frontiers. In the show, we are going to try to settle the age-old debate on whether it is better to be the local legend or the one that got away.
And we are your host. I am Christian.
And I am Damien.
And together, we are going to spend each episode trying to discover which lifestyle truly is best. Is it better to stay close to the roots that raised you, or to fly away into the unknown?
Yep, and during these conversations, we will be discussing personal experiences and asking guests for their input to decide once and for all whether it is better to remain, roam, or return. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Remain, Roam, Return, Triple R for short. How you doing, Christian?
I'm a little hungover, to be honest.
I asked because you look like hell.
Trust me, I feel much worse than I look.
That's hard to do, so that's bad.
I'm starting to realize staying out till 2 a.m. at concerts is just... I need sleep. I need to be... Even my watch was like, hey, bud, you were supposed to be in bed 4 hours ago.
It texted you, hey, bud. Hey, bud.
It's like, hey, man. Like, it tries to be like a cool watch, man. Like, not like a parent. Like, go to bed now. It's like, hey, bud, like, maybe you should think about going to bed right now. And
it's like your cool aunt.
Yeah. My watch
responsible, but tries to keep it real with you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, welcome back to Triple R. Before we get too far into the nonsense, I would like to introduce a very special guest for today. Brooke Thayer is here with us, and she has a lot of stories and a lot of countries to discuss. So without further ado, hey, Brooke, how you doing?
Hey, Damien and Christian. I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Well, Christian's not doing so great, but I made sure to get extra sleep for today, so I am up and at 'em.
To be fair,
At least one of you has it together.
Yeah. Well,
who'd have thought it'd be me?
That's the niceness of having a co-host for the podcast. Of there have been definitely times where Damien's come on, and I'm like, you look like a slug.
That's true.
Yep, and so it's a good yin and yang a bit of it, so it's nice.
Yeah. So, without further complications of this intro, I wanted to get down to the reason we asked you on is because back in, I believe it was 2021, I think you had gone on an adult gap year. And within the 4 or 5 months of starting that, you were on a podcast that I listened to called Zero to Travel Podcast. And literally since then, I've been following your Instagram because it's just, you're everywhere all the time. And it's just so awesome. So I wanted to before we get too far into that, can you kind of introduce yourself? Where'd you grow up? A little bit of backstory for the people listening.
Yeah, well, first of all, you make me sound way cooler than I actually am, so we'll
a lot cooler than us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Brooke Thayer, and I grew up in a suburb just outside of Seattle, Washington. Was there most my life until I decided to go down to the Bay Area for grad school, and then kind of got stuck there for 10 years. I don't know, San Francisco kind of sucks you in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You get lost in the hills.
Yes, right? But my quads were looking really good. So so I really enjoyed it there, but I was on kind of this career track, and no shade. I'm still a career girly, but I was getting really burnt out and sort of had this opportunity just to get out of Dodge, and I took 18 months off, and
wow.
I left my apartment, I left my job, I divorced my ex, not because of this, but that was a
separate occurrence.
Years before that, yeah. Essentially, though, I had nothing kind of holding me back, and I just went for it. I just went all around the world and went all around with really no plan, solo, and met some amazing people, went to some really cool, unique places. And then after about 18 months, decided I should probably try to be a functioning adult once again. So
Boo!
I know, right? So it's been a few years. I've been back in the corporate world once again, but it's I've managed to still travel quite a bit while still working full time, and I am, as always, planning my next exodus at some point.
Right. Well, it's very kismet because I actually had a couple of different questions that you already kind of answered. So one of the questions was going to be, I know you kind of like left your corporate job in San Francisco to go on that initial gap year, right? And so my next question was going to go, have you succumbed to being sequestered back to corporate world? And it seems like you have.
Yeah.
I have. I will say though, I made some changes. So I
What does
think
that look like?
yeah, man, I've been made some great changes, I will say. So I've been in the pharma industry,
Mm-hmm.
and I decided to pivot into a sales role. So the last few
Okay.
years I've been doing sales. So I sell drugs.
Yeah.
Yes. Our first drug dealer.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've been dying. We've been jonesing for a drug dealer.
Drug dealer who would admit it, at least. I think we maybe have had people on who were drug dealers, but they're not spouting that out. So no.
Yeah, just let us know if we have to blur your face and drop your voice like the monster level. We can keep you hidden,
Mm-hmm.
Top of the morning to all you fine folks out there. This is Mike from the Paddy Wagon Podcast. Be sure to join us every other Wednesday for a proper drink as we talk with a variety of interesting guests, ranging from the funny to the informative, the educational to the idiotic, and everything in between. You can find us at thepaddywagonpodcast.com, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. For up-to-date information on our upcoming guests, be sure to give us a follow on Instagram at paddywagonpod. Until the next time, sláinte, my friends.
Oh man. Well, I wish I was selling some stuff that's a bit more fun. I work in oncology, so.
Okay, all right. So we have a little bit of an overlap in careers. Then I work for an oncology hematology hospital. I can't say which one.
Okay. Well, I work in hematology, so.
There you go.
We may
all
have
right.
some circles here, some overlap.
And so just for clarity too, before you got into sales, was it biochemical?
Yeah,
is that what you're doing?
So
okay.
I'm a chemical engineer. So I started out my career, I would actually design the process to make cancer drugs. And it was really interesting. I actually loved doing that.
Yeah.
But it was very niche, and I realized that I would essentially go my entire career in this like little hub just next to the airport in San Francisco. It's where the vast majority at the time of biotech was in the country. Now it's kind of metastasized, for lack of a better word, to other cities in the country.
That's a clever play on words.
Yeah. I'll see myself out.
It's been a great interview. Thanks, Brooke, for coming on.
Shortest one yet.
Oh man. But yeah. So I really liked doing it, but I felt kind of like stuck, if that made sense. And then I ended up switching to doing more like data analytics, and then doing more like strategy work. Again, all in that San Francisco area because it's such a hub for biotech in general. And now I can basically work anywhere in the country on the sales side. Actually, I ended up moving to Minneapolis, so I'm
all right,
degrees outside.
So I'm based out of Nebraska. So that's where me and Damien are both from Nebraska. And I guess we probably should have gone.
We probably should have said that.
Probably a little bit of the theme of the podcast of, we're both from Nebraska, and then I left, and now I'm back in Nebraska, and then Damien
sorry.
Yeah, right.
It was actually my choice too. My job, I work remote, and so they're like, you can live wherever you want. And my significant other, she was like, I want to go home because I made her move a lot of different places.
That's sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I've dragged you to 3 separate states, so you get to pick the next one. But yeah, and then Damien's in LA, and he's like, yeah, I'm not coming back. So he agrees with your statement of why.
Yeah.
No, I shouldn't hate on it. I've only spent 30 seconds in Nebraska. I was
How's
That's
that?
as long as you need.
yeah. We turned around.
Yeah.
I was in South Dakota for work, and I was with my coworker, and he's like, "Yeah, you just crossed that bridge right there, and you're in Nebraska." And I was like, "I've never been in
Mhm.
Nebraska." And he's like, "Well, we gotta go." So 30 seconds, and then we're like, "All
Went to
right."
you went to the pedestrian bridge, crossed over, and went back.
I think so. I'm trying to remember exactly where we were. I want to say I was near Yankton, South Dakota.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a
Okay.
big lake right there called Lewis and Clark Lake that is in South Dakota and Nebraska at the same time.
Okay. Cool.
So I don't know who
I've-
owns it, but yeah, but yes, I know exactly where you were at, sadly.
yeah. Hey, small world.
Yeah.
Well, I will stick up for my hometown a little bit and say it is worthwhile for more than 30 seconds, but I would say a solid like 5 days is worth a trip to, especially
I would say-
Omaha specifically.
I would say a long weekend. A long
Long
weekend.
Okay, all
A
right.
long weekend would do you well. I think any more.
See,
than that.
that's how long I haven't been there.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, maybe a week.
No, I'm just
Chris is like,
setting
no.
expectations of a long weekend would be perfect kind of place, and so no.
Okay. So you were in San Francisco. So from Seattle to San Francisco to work in corporate America, you left to go on a gap year. And so I want to go before, because I really want to get into that, because you also took your gap year during COVID, which is very, very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I want to get into that. But before we get too far into that, I kind of want to go back to the hometown situation.
Yeah. Okay.
So when you were growing up in Seattle, what was life like there? Was it pretty like neighborhood or, like friend oriented based on where you were? And then also, did you go on vacations, which is what prompted this like lifestyle for you?
Yeah. So my hometown is technically Kirkland, Washington.
Oh.
Love Costco.
Shout out Costco.
Yes.
We talk about that all the time.
That might be like the other theme of the podcast is just me and Damien talking about Costco.
Well, I could not be happier. I love Costco.
Yeah.
I have the Costco swag.
Yes.
I wear it everywhere. Not ironically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they've committed to that $1.50 hot dog and pop combo.
The
pretty amazing.
issue now, though, is the guy retired. The main hot dog executive.
That's his title.
To me, that's all he needs to be. He's some high, probably like, has a C-suite title thing. Talking corporate talk here now, but yeah, he retired. But me and Buddy were talking about it, and someone was like, "Oh, they might raise it," and we're like, "Well, he said if you ever raise it, I will kill you. Not if you ever raise it while I work here." So it's a lifetime thing.
That's true.
So that is our saving grace, is he won't raise it because of a life threat.
Long live the $1.50 date night.
Yeah, not all heroes wear capes,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what.
exactly.
Some of them have an oversized cart.
Yeah. And a membership card.
There it is.
Exactly.
All right. Anyway, so you grew up in Kirkland.
Yeah, so
What did it look like?
I was so lucky, I have to say. I don't know if you guys know much about the Seattle
White privilege?
area,
Oh.
but oh man, like what an amazing place to grow up. It's right on the water. It's 20 minutes from Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents actually, I want to say they settled there. That makes it sound like I was on the Oregon Trail or something.
They took a wagon. They got dysentery.
Yeah.
They heard about the gold rush.
Yes.
Just one state over.
So that's how we kind of ended up there as a family. Because I don't know how we would have found it otherwise. But
Yeah.
back when I was a kid, there was actually farms in downtown Kirkland.
Mm.
Now the median home price for downtown Kirkland is $3 million.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see the tech boom kind of happen, or like, could you, like, being a kid, even notice like, hey, things are changing here?
Yeah, it was kind of wild actually. Just in, I'm in my 30s, so in my relatively short life, how things changed when I first moved there as a kid. I think we moved like when I was maybe 6. And yeah, it's where my mom grew up, and then my dad was just 30 minutes south of that. So essentially, that I view that as my hometown.
Sure.
And yes, I mean Microsoft is just one town over in Redmond, and you have Amazon, of course, was just across the bridge in Seattle. And the demographics, everything changed so much. It used to be like very white, not Midwest white, not Nebraska white.
Not this white.
Yeah.
No.
But now it's super diverse. It's actually pretty amazing. I mean, the types of food you can get there is incredible because there is a lot more like tech industries, and so we have a ton of people from all over the world that come there to work, and so it's pretty amazing. Like the grocery store game and that area is pretty good. You can get you want a Korean grocery store, you got it. You want Indian, you want any kind of anything at all, it's there. So overall, I was super lucky. It is a very affluent. I guess it's a city. I would have always called it a suburb, and then now that I live in Minnesota, I realize suburb has a new definition, and it's nothing like the suburbs here. It's like these cookie cutter houses. So, Kirkland, it's interesting. It's a very very well off city. It's about 100,000 people, but my family's very middle class. So I always thought I was poor because like there were kids getting brand new Lexuses for their 16th birthdays at my high school. It was wild. But the thing is, that's your bubble, right? Especially when you're young in high school, and it's like your world is so small. And so I thought that's just how life was. And then it wasn't until I went to college, and I went to college in Seattle, so not that far away, but suddenly I had so much more diversity in terms of like socioeconomic status and just people, also a lot of international students, and I was like, oh, okay. I was living in this fantasy world bubble, and turns out like I what a great upbringing, right? I was we were solidly middle class, and I had exposure to a lot of my friends had parents that were very successful, and I feel like I got a lot of exposure to that. So navigating like, oh, should I go to school? Should I go to grad school? What should I do? I felt like that was all kind of taken care of just based on the demographics of the community. If that makes sense.
That's kind of how I felt growing up. I grew up more lower middle class, and so did Damien. But our parents were very smart of having us grow up in nice areas. So like, again, you don't want to say a suburb of Omaha, because I don't know if Omaha truly has suburbs, but of like, I was the first person to go to college in my family, but then I'm going to like my best friend's parents are Ivy League grads. And so it's like this weird combo, but because I got into that like group, it was just like, oh, I'm just doing what my friends are doing and not realizing, oh, I'm actually doing really big stuff for my family because of like that group. And it's just kind of interesting. It like becomes the norm. I didn't think about it like of me like doing huge things. I was just doing what my friends were doing in a good way, not like, doing drugs.
The good peer pressure.
Yeah.
We're selling drugs.
There you go. Yeah.
Come on, level up.
we call that peer reviewed pressure instead of peer pressure. Gotcha. All right. So thank you for that awesome backstory. And I did want to kind of focus a little bit more on the section of growing up there. Did you take a lot of vacations? Is that what prompted this whole like mindset for you, or did you discover this mindset of travel on your own?
Well, I would say I discovered international travel kind of on my own as an adult, but I was primed because my mom's a flight attendant.
Oh,
there it is. Okay.
Yeah. So she would just like take me and my sister across the country to go visit relatives, or we'd go to Mexico for 3 days because we could fly for free, and we would just do stuff like that. She's got more energy than I have. My mom does CrossFit, and she's like just bouncing around the world. So yeah, I was totally primed for that. And then I would actually say living in San Francisco, because that was the first point in my life where I'd kind of established my career more. A lot of my buddies were kind of coming from these, these tech companies, like I guess it was Facebook back then, now Meta,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
Google. Just a lot of disposable income, I guess,
Mhm.
was kind of circulating in my bubble in San Francisco, because that also is very much a different kind of bubble.
Yeah.
And that was what people were doing. They were going on these trips, and I guess I had never had the means to be able to do a lot of travel before that point in my life, and didn't really know that you could just like do that. I only knew how to fly standby,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
just places. So yeah, I think that sort of inspired it, and I did go on quite a few just vacations where I'd take 2 weeks off work and go with my ex, to Europe or Asia or something, and it was always too short. It was always
Yeah.
like I, I hated that flight back.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, no, like, not only do I have to go sit in a plane for 12 hours, I have to go back to work on Monday, and
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it's I never quite felt like enough. And then I was incredibly lucky. One of the companies I was at offered a sabbatical after
Oh.
6 years
Nice.
of employment. And so I actually added like a few weeks to that. I ended up taking 10 weeks. And that was my first like longer term trip. And I was just hooked. I was totally hooked. I did hostels. Previously, I had always planned everything like to a T. Like, oh, I have
Yeah.
2 weeks, so every day is planned, every hotel is booked.
Mhm.
And then this one, I was like, I have this luxury of time. I'm just gonna like book a flight in and book a flight out, and like
Yeah.
see what happens. So yeah, my first stop was New Zealand, and I was doing
Wow.
hostels.
Damn.
I just rented a car and was like, oh, I'll just drive around the country.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I met so many cool people. There's this whole community of gap year people and backpackers and things that like honestly we don't have that culture in the
No.
US. It's
Not
like,
at all.
I mean, you see it a little, but very rarely. There's not even just hostels. There's not a lot
No.
here.
Yeah. No.
So it just opened my eyes to, first of all, I could travel cheaply. I didn't have to plan so much, all these things, and I could just kind of see like, oh, how long do I want to stay here? I don't know, but I know I want to do another day, so I'll
Yeah.
do another day and decide tomorrow. And it was so freeing. And then at this point, I was in my early 30s, and I met all these young people who they were just like taking 6 months off and just spending 6 months in New Zealand.
Mhm.
And I was just like, wow, that's so cool. I wish when I was your age, I would have done something like that.
Yeah.
And then they were just like, well, why don't you? I was like, oh, I got
Yeah.
this career, this, job.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, so you have more money saved than I do, I'm sure. So it's easier for you than for me.
There it
I was
is.
like, oh, got me. And they just like one by one, all of these barriers that I had in my head that I placed in my
Mhm.
head, they just kind of tore them down. And by the end of the 10 weeks, I ended up doing New Zealand, Australia. I went to Bali for a little bit, and then Myanmar, which was
Yeah.
incredible. And by the end of that 10 weeks, I was just like, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
I want a year. I want a year of this.
Yeah.
And then, it took me a while to kind of work up the courage to actually make that happen, because
Mhm.
you get home and then you're back. I had this rent controlled apartment in San Francisco,
Oh,
which is
that's
like
key.
gold. I was
Yeah.
there for 9 years.
Wow.
So
That
I was
yeah,
there.
you getting that is like an amazing thing. Probably in that time of being in San Francisco, the rent of that would have like I don't even want to know, like 10 times.
Yeah,
Probably.
in 9 years, that would have been 11 times the price.
Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, I was in a great neighborhood, and yeah, it was just so that felt like this kind of I don't know if I'm using this correct, like a sunk cost fallacy. I was like,
Yeah.
well, I have this. I don't want to give this up. But then
It's the illusion of safety.
Well,
It's
and
that
I also-
illusion of being safe. And it's hard to just willingly break out of that.
I also kind of want
Yeah.
to go back to what you're talking about. You were talking to these younger travelers who are more likely Gen Z versus us being millennials. I think kind of goes back to of like being millennials. We were told like you have to do everything the correct way. You have to go to college. You have to go to grad school half the time, it feels like nowadays. You get a good job and then you get married and then you start a family. And like, that's what you have to do. And Gen Z's like, fuck all of that. We're gonna die tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah.
And then we're also seeing a lot of millennials now of, like we did that, and we're like, we are burnt the fuck out now. Like this is like, especially in like the corporate
100%.
world, it's like I cannot hear KPI one more goddamn time, or I'm gonna lose my mind. And now we're seeing people taking gap years are like,
If I have to ad hoc one more meeting, it's over.
Let's circle back.
Yeah.
just the fucking Teams jingle that like,
Oh
you're like,
my God.
This
You
is
know, it's so fun.
PTSD.
It's so funny that you mentioned that real quick, because I thought I was escaping the work PTSD by getting out of the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the restaurant industry, the ticket printer plays over and over and over in your head, in your dreams. And I was like, thank God I'm done
You're
with
just
that.
watching The Bear where it's just the whole thing. You're like,
Yeah.
"Ah!"
No, that was a traumatic experience. As great as that show was, I was like flop sweating the entire time. But now my new ticket printer nightmare is the Teams jingle.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you say that. It is a goddamn nightmare.
Yeah, and so as millennials, we're seeing people traveling gap years, or like van life is such a big thing right now as well, of being like, I'm just gonna sell and then and also being able to work remote has been
That's huge.
thing.
That's
For
huge.
sure.
And so
honestly, I was inspired by these Gen Zers, because that's primarily who I was traveling with. There's a lot of really young people, and first of all, their tattoo game is wild. They're doing tattoos, stick and poke in the hostels. They're tattooing each other. They're getting tattoos on a whim. I was with this German woman that we met in Slovenia. We happened to be in Berlin at the same time, met up. We were quite drunk.
Yeah.
And she wanted me to draw something on her with a Sharpie, and she liked it. It was just a wave. It was very basic. And the next day we went to a tattoo place and she got it tattooed on her.
That's so badass.
They love tattoos, and but it was kind of inspiring because they view the world just differently. Like, I think Christian, what you're saying about this millennial, like we have this protocol that we like have to follow, and I feel like even just like breaking away, getting divorced, and like breaking away from the corporate world for a little while was like kind of freeing. But then meeting these younger people that don't quite have that same like predisposal to protocol that we've kind of been force fed, and they're just they're doing things their own way. They're taking a longer time. They're also less saddled by like extreme student debt than we are, because a lot of them are coming from like Europe and things where education is accessible.
Well, and I think they probably see how indoctrinated the previous generations were with that mindset too, and they're like, this is a waste of time. Like, they see how indoctrinated people were, and they go, well, you're following the rules and you're not happy. Why wouldn't I just not do that? And then you're like, oh yeah, I can totally just like not do that and find my own way.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. So it was inspiring for sure.
I was actually curious, the trip you were talking about with starting in New Zealand and then ending in Myanmar, was that the gap year that you were talking about?
No, that was sort of the inspiration.
The impetus. Okay.
Yeah, so I did that I think in 2018, I want to say.
Okay.
Oh yeah, thanks for circling back. I forgot about the whole.
No, we do that a lot too.
This
we get on tangents. Yeah, we get on tangents like crazy. The only thing that keeps us on track is I am very like, tell me more about what happened back then. Yeah. So we call me the king of the let's take it back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because so the timing of I've been calling it my adult gap year, because the other one felt like more of a sabbatical.
Sure.
I guess like
because it was 10 weeks,
an apartment to return to.
Yeah,
it was like summer break.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
there you go.
Exactly. And then I just kind of went off the deep end. I was so nervous to get rid of my apartment. I did an illegal sublet to this couple.
Allegedly.
And I
Gavin Newsom's gonna come after you.
He was like, why is there this couple parking in your spot? And I was like, oh, well, that's my boyfriend and his girlfriend. We're in a polyamorous relationship
there you
in
go.
San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, when was the last time you slept there? And I was like, well, I've been at Burning Man for the last 10 days. So, I'm just going to sleep there tonight.
There you
also
go.
the most San
And then no more
Francisco.
questions.
the San Francisco answer of like, no, you try saying that in Minneapolis, they're gonna be like, I'm not
Straight
sure
to jail. Straight to jail. That's illegal.
Yep, I'm pretty sure you can't do that. No.
So yeah, so once I got the illegal sublet kind of all sorted out, then yeah, I felt more emboldened to leave, and yeah, so I ended up leaving in late 2020. So it was during COVID, but it wasn't during the intense, like
Yeah,
that
it kind
March,
of
April, May,
settled
like,
a little.
yeah, like vaccines weren't out, but we understood more about. It was really easy to get tested for it. We understood kind of how it was spread more, things like that. And so it was actually really hard to get out of the country.
Yeah.
But my first stop was Croatia because they were the only place within Europe. I had a few places I wanted to try to get to start out with, and one of those was Slovenia. And so in order to do that, I got to Croatia because I was able to show them a negative test.
Oh, there you go.
Negative COVID test. And then after 2 weeks in Croatia, I still couldn't get into Slovenia, but I could get into Slovakia. So I like hop on this bus and go to Slovakia. And after 2 weeks, I think I did Slovakia and Austria. And then I was able to get to Slovenia. So it was kind of, in some ways, it kind of forced my hand to go to certain places that would let me in. But I took every border crossing, I took a test. And so I would always follow the local, rules and customs. And sometimes people were wearing masks everywhere, even outside walking alone. Sometimes they were like, it's not real. So every country kind of had their own culture around it. And I just would take the tests and do what I had to do.
How was it going to Croatia, like coming from probably like San Fran, which was all of California was very locked down? Was it more open, or like how were they like were you able to do things like
yes,
like, could you go to like museums, like which is another thing, Damien hates museums and I love them, and so
Ooh.
I'm trying to think if I ended up going. It was my second time to Croatia, and so I was able to kind of like be a little bit more chill and kind of take my time. I did go to some museums, of course, but I know when I flew out, I ended up having a delay where I missed a connection, and I had to kill like 7 hours in, I think it was Split, which is Croatia, but I was flying to Dubrovnik, home of Game of Thrones, kind of.
Hey,
heard it's gorgeous.
You gotta
there.
do it, right? You gotta do it.
I'll be there this year.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we'll
so
have to
excited.
chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I hope you understand. I'm getting a lot of recommendations from you, just so you know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you got to do the Game of Thrones tour.
Yes.
But yeah,
Anyways.
So this layover, I like snuck away from the airport, and I just went to this little, I guess it was like a fortress. And I remember I was sitting out on like a promenade. I hope I'm using that word correctly.
Yeah, that probably sounds correct.
I was having some like lunch, and there were all these people outside. It was sunny. I had a waterfront view. Everyone was happy. And it was like a stark difference from San Francisco, where people were taking it really seriously to the point of, I think there was a lot of mental health concerns, and it was just really intense. So seeing these two things, it was just like, I felt so free.
Yeah.
And I'm all for, being cognizant, keeping others safe, all of that. But, I was just like sitting in an outdoor restaurant and having my little glass of wine. And, oh, it was like magic. And I was just like, I'm so happy.
I think there is a happy medium of like, yes, there were a lot of stuff, but like, as I was living in Iowa at the point of COVID, and I was joking, like, COVID didn't come to Iowa, apparently.
Just not effective.
It somehow just, the way people are acting, it just passed over Iowa. And so, like, me and Damien had very stark differences of COVID experience, because I don't know if we really ever talked about it on the pod, but it was like, I
was in LA at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure anybody who listens to the news or anything like that can have a slight understanding of how COVID was over here. So it was a very stark difference between Nebraska and LA. But I did want to ask you, while you were traveling, because you had some issues getting in to Slovenia or Slovakia. I'm sorry, right?
No, Slovenia.
No, I was right the first time.
Sort of both, but my ultimate goal was to get to Slovenia.
Mhm.
Why
I wanted to do some
Slovenia?
hiking. Oh, they have amazing nature. So Slovenia is so underrated.
I've heard great things about it, but yeah, I was just curious to see if there was.
I'm such a fan. So the capital is Ljubljana, which if you were to spell that, it has like a bunch of J's in there, and it's like Ljubljana.
Like you're saying it underwater.
Yeah.
Yeah. But oh my god, I mean, there's all these amazing like medieval cities on a river with a castle in Europe. They're everywhere, but Ljubljana was special. It was just so beautiful, and Slovenians are very cool too. Like they have this humor that they just kind of joke with you, and it was just really really good spot. And they have a wine country there, and then they have, of course, Lake Bled is probably the most famous thing to go see. So that's this beautiful lake surrounded by mountains, and there's a small island in the middle with like this church, and you can go paddleboarding around, and it's just gorgeous. So I'm going to see that. And then there's a ton of mountains as well, and one of the things I wanted to do was summit their highest mountain, which isn't all that high.
You're like, no problem.
This Washingtonian's like, it's not a 14-footer, or 14er or whatever. So, I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder apparently with that. But it's called Mount Triglav, and it's on their flag. They have a lot of pride, and they say you're not a real Slovenian until you summit this mountain. And so, actually, I went with my German friend that ended up getting that tattoo, and it was a 2-day thing. We had to get like equipment because you end up having a harness, and it's called Via Ferrata. It means iron path in Italian. Don't quote me on that, actually. Something like that.
We don't have a producer, so you're good.
No.
Perfect. Yeah. So you hike, and then at some point it's kind of like a scramble, really. It's like a really hard hike or a pretty easy climb to get to the last bits. And it's actually kind of wild. So we met these really cool Slovenians. We had dinner at this mountain hut, and they kind of invite us into their little crew, even though they had pretty limited English, but they were so awesome. Yeah. And they were like, we're going at sunrise, come with us. And we're like, okay, sure. So we get up at like 4 a.m. We're climbing this mountain. It's like dark. We have these really weak headlamps, and we're just trying to kind of get to the top. But then we get to the top of this mountain, and ironically, I had a full-size Slovenian flag because I met these cool Italian guys, and one of them, he gets a flag from every country. And then, of course, his last day in Slovenia, it was a Sunday, and like all the stores were closed. Yeah. So we couldn't get a flag. So I ended up getting one that I was going to mail to him. But I was like, well, why not take this flag up the mountain? It literally has the mountain
there
on
you
the flag.
go. Yeah.
And so, there was a point where me and my friend got a picture, and I'm like holding this flag, and all these Slovenians at the top, they started singing their national anthem facing me holding the flag. And
that's
it was like
really cool.
Sunrise, and I still think that, like, I'm getting goosebumps. I still think that's like a peak travel.
Yeah, that's surreal. I think you're an actual Slovenian now. Yeah,
apparently
that was a rite of passage.
They do this thing where they have you like bend over. At least this is what they told me. Now in hindsight, I'm like, this is real. They have you like bend over, and they like almost like whip you with the harness from the climb.
Okay.
And so like they were like, like limited English, trying to get. And so I went along with it. Part of me is like, I feel like I should have got paid for that. I don't know.
You could make a Patreon.
They're like, this silly American.
That's so
old Slovenian tradition.
Why is nobody else doing this? Everybody else got up here just fine.
Yeah. Why is that guy filming? I don't know.
No wonder they were singing praises to the flag that you were holding. Oh my god, that is so funny.
It was worth it. The roundabout circle to Slovenia was well worth it.
What a cool experience. Can I ask real quick, just because, sorry, Christian, I was just curious because you said you had like a little mountaintop like lunch, right? Can I ask what did you eat?
Well, I'm trying to remember. So it was kind of a blur because it took us 10 hours of hiking pretty steep elevation to get to this hut.
Mhm.
And they actually helicopter all the food in. There's no
Oh.
trash. You have to
Oh,
pack out all
wow.
your trash.
Pack your
Okay.
junk
And
out.
but you can pay to get like a hot meal. And even like wine. They of
Yeah.
course have
Ooh.
wine. I'm trying to remember what I want to say it was like some kind of beef and potato dish.
Okay. Nice.
Sounds
Yeah.
about right.
Really
Yeah.
not very memorable. I mean, it was at the top of a mountain,
Mhm.
and so
You need the
I feel like
energy.
having anything. It was. I remember it being good.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
their wine, Slovenian wine is very good.
Yeah.
Especially that high up, it hits you quick.
Yes, the
Yeah.
altitude
Yes.
for sure. Yeah.
Sorry, Christian, go for it.
No, I was just going to talk about like I think a lot of people do like pass over Eastern European countries, but they do have amazing culture, and like it's definitely on my list of next time I go to Europe is to try to hit it. And like the cost of living and like expenses is so much lower than like Western side of Europe. Like it is ridiculous where like you can get like a bottle of wine for like what would be equivalent to like $3, but
And it's
would
good
be
wine.
And
yeah,
it's
it's
good.
great
Yeah.
wine, but it
It's
would
not
be
too much
hundreds of dollars back in the States. And so yeah, I think there is still a little bit of stigma because of like the whole USSR stuff, even though it wasn't even in our lifetime. But
Mhm.
but I think,
Yeah.
yeah, people just think of it just being like gray.
Dude, I
Yeah.
fucking loved Prague. Prague was the same for me. It was like you get a fucking pint of beer for like 30 cents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the best thing I've ever had. And it was just beautiful over there. But
Yeah.
sorry to hijack. Continue, Brooke. Sorry about
No,
that.
I was gonna say. I mean, this is like my favorite topic ever. I could talk about all this travel
Same.
and destinations for days. But Eastern Europe, like, man, I mean, like in addition to that area, you can go even farther out. If you go to like Georgia and Armenia,
Mhm.
Armenia has, well, actually both countries have amazing food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredibly affordable. In Georgia, you can get as an American a year-long visa on arrival, so you can just like
No
show
shit.
up. Like, I think I'll stay for a year.
Wow.
And they have
That's incredible.
mountains, although you get pretty close to Russia to get to
Yeah.
those mountains. So,
Yeah.
you know, things that I will say, all of the travel I'm discussing was prior to the invasion of Ukraine. So
Yes.
things have changed drastically. So
Yeah.
please,
Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But yeah, Georgia has
Mhm.
amazing wine. They actually developed their winemaking process separate from the rest of the world. So they use these like underground like pots almost.
Yeah.
So their wineries have all these like holes in the ground, and it's super cool. And then
wanna try
Ukraine,
that.
I spent a month in Ukraine, and oh my goodness, amazing country. Lviv is probably one of the most beautiful
Yep.
cities maybe the most beautiful place I feel like I've
Yeah.
been. Amazing
Really?
food. The people are so warm. They have so much pride in the country as well, and it is obviously awful to hear about everything going on, but I'm not surprised how strong that
Yeah.
they've been in this, because it was just evident being there. They were just like, it was so, yeah, what a cool place.
Have you ever been to Russia, on the other hand? Like, have you ever
I
visited
have
anywhere?
not.
Okay.
I have not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously
It-
now with everything going on, but was it ever on your list at some point to visit?
Yeah, I mean, I really want to go to St. Petersburg. And
Mhm.
at one point, so there's a ferry in the past, so not now, but
Yeah.
you could either from Tallinn in Estonia or Helsinki in Finland,
Yeah.
you could take this ferry and you get, I think it's 3 days in St. Petersburg,
Mhm.
visa free.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, I want to do it so bad. And I was
Yeah.
in both of those places, and both times I was looking it up, and it was just because of COVID they had it closed, and then now other reasons. But yeah, so that maybe that will happen in the future again. Definitely worth kind of looking into. And yeah, because and then the Baltics, so Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, that area is amazing
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
Also was behind the Iron
Also on
Curtain.
the list.
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
I think people don't think about going there, and they're pretty small countries, so you can
Yeah.
kind of do, like, I just did buses and whatnot. At one point, I think me and a nice German man rented a car, and we did like a road trip to the national parks. But for the most part, it's super easy to get around with buses and trains and whatnot. And all the summers there, it was amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a really great part of the world.
So You did. It sounds like you flew during COVID over. It sounds like you did a lot of Eastern Europe, and then where'd you go from there? I guess did you go over to Asia or did you stay? Because I'm very curious about what you did for 18 months because that sounds
Yeah, well,
amazing and terrible at the same time. Like,
Mm. Anybody
like I would,
who's traveled knows that's a long time to be out of your comfort zone.
yeah.
yeah, I had my packing game pretty on point. I will say that. Yeah, I ended up for that leg. I ended up spending my last month in Turkey,
Oh,
Okay.
which is
nice.
amazing. Which is
Yeah.
half or part, part Europe, part Asia.
It is
Mhm.
one of the most interesting. I did a weird deep dive of ADHD-ness of I love Nebraska, like University of Nebraska sports, and one of our players for basketball is from Turkey, and I was like, I don't know enough about Turkey, and so I went on a weird deep dive about the language of Turkey. It's like because it has a lot of Arabic. It's not Arabic, but it has a lot of influences from Arabic, but also has some of the like, historically when it was Constantinople ness of it, and it's just like this is a very interesting place, but also I've heard it can be not scary, but like political right now
Mm-hmm.
is with their leader. I've heard interesting.
Yeah, with Erewhon, I think.
Yeah.
I again, don't
Isn't
quote
that
me on it.
isn't that a store in LA? Like $45 smoothies?
It is.
Yeah.
And ironically, at the Ritz-Carlton in Maui,
Oh, there you go.
Oh.
which I just found out. I was at a conference. I know.
I was gonna
Rough-
I would
was a fun rep.
I was gonna bring up the crazy contrast of your most recent travel that you posted, but we'll get back to that. Continue on about you spent, was it a week in Turkey? Did you say
A month.
a month in Turkey?
Well, that was my first time. I will, to be honest, I've been back twice or three times.
Wow. Okay.
Turkey's phenomenal. There's so much to see, and of course, there's Istanbul, which is this huge city. There's a ton of medical tourism. There's just you can see the Hagia Sophia with this famous mosque. There's just tons to see there. But I also went to the center of the country, and it's called Cappadocia. So they're famous. They have these limestone hills that people actually in the past carved dwellings into, and so you can just go hike around, and there's all of these cool dwellings and just art carved in these limestone hills. And then every morning there's a huge flock of hot air balloons, and so
beautiful.
I think I spent a week there because it was just it's probably one of the coolest. If I was to do like a top 10 places, which please don't ask me to do.
I was going to say, you're going to be so mad because I'm going to ask you a similar question at the end. So just start preparing now.
Oh my goodness, the pressure. But yeah, I think I did sunrises pretty much every day there. It's just phenomenal. It's very romantic, although I was there as a solo traveler.
So you said you had your packing game on point. Was that backpacking?
So this is a controversial subject amongst the long-term travel community.
Bring it on.
The big backpack, or I actually did a carry-on suitcase.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I got so much shit for it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Every time I walked into the hostel, they're like, "Oh, is this your first trip?" And I'm like, "I've been traveling for years straight." But hey, I am team suitcase all the way. I will say there was a couple of times when it was quite annoying. One time I was in the Philippines and there was a hostel that was about 2 football fields. I was going to say 200 meters, but I was like, oh no.
No, I would get that.
I would have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
In terms of American units, the football field. And it was all in the sand. So I just put the suitcase on my head and just walked. And then I had a buddy. She was this really cool younger Israeli woman who had just gotten out of army, which this is all before everything going on now. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And she had this big backpack. And like, by the time we got to the hostel, she was dying because she had been like schlepping this backpack. Yeah. And I just like had it up on my head and it was fine. So I haven't run into too many issues. Cobblestone streets.
Yeah. I was about to say that I made that mistake once.
I mean, usually you're not like having to walk for long periods on them, or you just like go to a bigger street where there's like paved. I don't know. For me, it was never an issue with the suitcase. And then I met this really cool, another German woman. We met at a hostel on a Greek island, and ended up traveling together for 3 months. She's super cool.
Wow.
Wow.
Romania.
Shout
We
out.
went to, Albania as well, and then also Turkey. And she had a backpack, and she was such a light traveler. I swear she had half the stuff I did, but she always had to check her bag. And mine, I could carry on.
That is
And
a
I
problem.
had so much more stuff. And so I was a big fan of my suitcase. Plus, I do the packing cube, so it's always really easy to access versus having this huge backpack that you got to like go in from the top and finagle everything. And even just like ergonomics, maybe I'm just like getting old, but I liked being able to have my suitcase on the ground and kind of, pull it along versus having to like have everything on my back. So I'm team carry-on suitcase. I had a smaller, like normal sized backpack as well that I would keep my like valuables and like things that I needed for longer travel, like an eye mask and earplugs and kind of that sort of thing. If I was doing like a bus or something, I would keep the backpack with me and put the other bag under the bus.
Like a day bag.
It was easy. You really don't need anything fancy. You really don't.
Were you mostly staying in hostels on this trip?
Pretty much. Yeah. I did a mix of go ahead.
Sorry, did you run into, I know some you age out of, which is, I think, an issue. I think, because I remember when I was doing my backpacking trip through Europe of it, like, some of them were like 25-year-old max. And so I was wondering if you ran into any issues with that.
I ran into zero issues with my age. I was often one of the oldest people in like a crew because I'm a bit social, so I'll just go, Americans also were known for going and talking to everybody. So we meet people easily. Which is kind of nice.
Very much so.
But plenty of times there were people that were older, sometimes significantly older than me. I didn't run into too many age restrictions. I think that's a very regional thing. I think there's some areas of the world that do have more of a restriction on age. I'd only seen 35.
Okay.
But in general, I think that's becoming less frequent.
Yeah.
And my strategy with hostels, so I would do all girl rooms. I would do mixed dorms. Doesn't really matter. I thought for the most part. And when I was in more affordable areas, I would often do a private room in a hostel. That way I still get the benefits of like meeting people and it's just like a fun vibe, but I could get like good sleep.
Yeah.
Again, I was sometimes old, but then if you're in like Amsterdam or a place that's kind of more on the expensive side, you can travel still somewhat affordably by doing it. And a lot of hostels have kitchens, so you can cook your own food if you want. I generally didn't because maybe laziness, but also I like to go eat. I want to go eat
exactly.
all the things.
Yep.
Yeah. So I thought that was a good way to go. A lot of countries don't have as much of a hostel culture. Actually, interestingly enough, in the Middle East, even hotels, depending on where you're at, are less common. So I did a lot more couch surfing in the Middle East because the hospitality is just like incredible. I mean, there were so many times I was welcomed into people's homes and like given a place to stay, meals, everything. People were so kind and sweet. So that's just a different vibe.
I remember hearing you say something about that in the podcast, the Zero to Travel podcast, and I was actually curious, when you're couch surfing in other countries, is there like a website, or is it just strictly you're just meeting people?
It was a bit of both. So I think if you're gonna do like a longer backpacker style trip, or I should just say solo trip in general, there's an app, I think it's called Couchsurfer or Couchsurfing.
I did that as well back before like Airbnb was even an idea kind of thing.
It's now paywalled, but it's like $15 a year or something like that.
That's very reasonable.
You don't even have to actually use it to stay on people's couches. You can they have like a meetup feature. So that's really helpful if you go somewhere and you're like, I just arrived in this country. Like, I don't know anyone, but I really want to go do this thing, but it'd be more fun. There's some things that are fine to do solo. Like museums, best solo. I hate going to museums with other people because then you have to share like, oh, are you done with this?
Yeah.
Well, I love doing that. But then if you're going to go, like, let's say there's like a bar that's famous for this drink. Well, it's kind of fun to go with people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's a really good way to like match up with people quickly. And then, yeah, you can stay with people. You can host people as well. So highly recommend that app. And then I would say very few places in the world have this level of hospitality, but around the Middle East, I will say also as a solo female traveler,
I was about to
I'm going to be
say,
invited into homes. As a solo male traveler, you likely would not get close to that level of hospitality because having a strange man in the home where there's women is
Yeah.
culturally less acceptable than having a stranger that's a woman. And so I was welcomed in quite a bit, and yeah, given food. Couple times I've like slept there. Sometimes I'm like, to be honest, I'd rather stay at a hotel and just kind of have my own space and not feel, I don't know, just like I was, I don't know. Yeah. So it was amazing. And people will just offer, sometimes like one time I was actually with this, let's see, it's a Canadian woman. We met on a bus in Albania. And then like a year later, she was like, oh, hey, I see you're in Turkey. I'm also in Turkey.
Oh, nice.
Kurdistan. I was like, yes, I do.
You said
So we met up
Turkmenistan?
there. Iraqi Kurdistan. So,
Iraqi Kurdistan.
So it's like the northern part of Iraq, and it's actually, they have their own military, the Peshmerga, which means the one that faces death. Just like such a badass.
That's so metal.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're hardcore. They were like fighting ISIS, so they're very hardcore. So they have their own border patrol, their own like government, but they're still part of Iraq, and they're actually allies with the U.S. So it's different than going into like Baghdad, which is what they call federal Iraq.
Yeah.
Where they're not very happy with Americans. So
Yeah.
I stuck to that area. But yeah, my friend and I, we got lost, and we're in this place called Amedi, which I believe is where the three wise men from the Bible started their journey. Or there's some kind of biblical reference, and it was really this amazing, cool spot. But we were clearly lost, and this little girl comes out, and she's just like, "You can come inside." And we're like, are your parents there? And I guess she had been studying English, so we ended up having lunch with this family, and they were like so sweet. In the TV, they had Mecca on, and everyone's circling, and it was just like so cute and
so wholesome.
Yeah, it was very, very sweet.
So I actually have one more question regarding this topic, and it's going to kind of put you on the spot here for a second. But if you could give anybody who is nervous about traveling for an extended period, if you could give them one piece of advice, what do you think it would be?
You'll figure it out.
That's the best. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. And if you don't like a place, you just go to a different place. If you don't like a hotel or a hostel, you go to a different hostel.
Well, and I think it's really important that you said that too, because like you said, you previously were such a planner. You had every minute, every day planned out.
Like, my personal finance spreadsheet is insane. Like and so it was hugely outside of my comfort zone to travel in this way. And the thing is though, then my comfort zone like grew, and now I'm totally fine with it. And so, yeah, even if it's not your nature, like you just put yourself in that position and you just have to flex. And it might be uncomfortable. I mean, I had times when I was like stressed. I remember thinking like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tomorrow. And that stressed me out. Now I'm just like, no, I'll be fine.
We'll figure it out
somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such an important piece of advice, because I think there's a lot of people, and I know people like this, who are straight up afraid to travel because of the what ifs. The what ifs really, really put a barrier on a lot of people. So I think people hearing that coming from you, somebody who is a planner, being like, dude, you'll figure it out. I think that's super, super important.
Yeah.
I also think another hesitation that I've heard from people is just like safety.
Sure.
And especially as a solo female traveler. But I will say there's a lot of parts of the world that are incredibly, incredibly safe. even places you wouldn't maybe expect. But like if you wanted to start somewhere, I mean, gosh, go. A lot of Europe is very safe, but specifically like the Nordics, for example, right? Go to Norway, go to Sweden or Finland, go do a sauna in Finland and jump in the Baltic Sea. Like these are some of the safest places you can go. English is everywhere. It's super easy. But like I was my most recent trip, I did a month over in the Arabian Peninsula. So I did Oman, Abu Dhabi, and then I went to this island of Socotra, which is part of Yemen, which is probably maybe one of the coolest places I've ever been.
The pictures were breathtaking.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Really beautiful place.
I'm so lazy about pictures because I just accumulate too many. So I still need to post a bunch more, but maybe in 6 months I'll have some more up there. And then I did Qatar, or Qatar, I believe they say. Yeah. And it was I had the most mind. So these are some of, take Yemen out of that equation. But I mean, Oman, Qatar, like these are some of the safest countries in the world. There's essentially like no crime. And I actually, I flew back. I had to do I call them doctor dinners. We do like a nice dinner with, healthcare professionals. And so I was doing one of those, and I had a hotel. I was in Rochester, Minnesota, where the Mayo Clinic is. And I had a hotel because I knew I'd get really tired because of the jet lag after dinner. And I woke up at 2 a.m. and I was like, oh, I'll just drive home. I'm only 90 minutes from Minneapolis. I'm awake. Close. I'm fully awake. And I was in this parking garage, just kind of like taking my time, being like, oh, okay, I'll put this here in my car. And then I stopped and I was like, it's 2 a.m. You're in a parking garage alone. Like, I was like, this is like a very, as a solo woman, a very dangerous scenario. And I was so used to being in these super safe countries. And I was like, oh, I gotta get in the car and go. Like, you kind of forget that home isn't necessarily like this, bubble. Yeah. And so there's a lot of places you can go where your physical safety is like way less of a question than a lot of the US. And I think that's something that you almost have to like leave to go see that if you haven't experienced that before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is really true. And it's just having your wits will get you so far anywhere, really. Like, just be aware of your surroundings and you'll be fine in majority of places. Like,
and don't be a dick.
Yeah. That was me and Damien have essentially a full episode about traveling and not being a dick. Yeah. And then people are really nice to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I will also argue the counterpoint, know when to be a dick.
There it is. There you go.
That's true.
Even better.
I am generally never a dick. I like to think I'm I don't know. I just don't really get too mad. I understand.
You're not giving off dickish vibes right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's still time.
There's still, just wait. But give me a few drinks and then we'll see. But there's a couple of times when I had to, it's actually for me out of my comfort zone. I had to like be very, like I was in Egypt and this guy would just not stop following me. And it was just it was harassment really. Yeah. And I had learned a few Arabic phrases and one of them was like a really harsh, like no, like not just no, but like absolutely not,
Yeah.
And so I turn around and I say that to him. And he's like, and then he's like, how do you know that? And I was like, because of people like you.
I had to learn it. Yeah.
It was one of those, and then he left me alone. And so I think actually in some cases as Americans, we really value politeness and we don't often value directness in the way that, other cultures might. And so like knowing, like, I think you should always be cognizant and polite when you can, but knowing when to flip and be like,
yes. Yeah.
Dude, like, this
man, I think that's the number one piece of advice in this entire episode. Yeah. Don't be a dick, but don't be afraid to be a dick as well.
You need to be.
Yeah, that's really great. So I actually wanted to. So we've talked a lot about your travels, and it's been very, very enlightening and just incredible storytelling on your behalf.
I have one more question there.
Go for it. Go for it.
Though, with a lot of traveling. I'm not meaning this to be in a rude way at all. Did you run into like trustafarians or like kids? Like, because that is a complaint that me and Damien get a lot, because we both do love to travel, of like, and you can do it on a very inexpensive. You can do it, but it's a thing where like, oh no, only rich people do that. Like, what would be your response to like that? Did you run into people who you're like, oh, you don't really understand like what traveling's about, or like,
Can I ask what a trustafarian is? I have no idea what that is.
so like a trustafarian essentially is a person who has like a trust fund. So if someone who comes from a very high wealth family where they've
Gotcha.
never really had to work, and so like you see it more right now of them traveling to like Bali, I think is probably a big one right now, of like,
so just rich kids.
Yeah, rich kids traveling. And
Okay.
And so that I would say sometimes solo travelers get that stigma attached to them.
So is your question, did she experience people thinking she was that?
Yeah, or just
okay.
Did you experience people who you were kind of like that?
You know, I think I experienced, let's see, did I run into people that clearly had a lot of money? Yes. Was it common? Not where I was staying.
Yeah.
They were the ones slapping you with a leather belt at the top of a mountain.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I was in a lot of hostels, and I would say I felt like a fancy person in a lot of these hostels because I would go out to eat 2 meals a day, and you can travel so cheap. You can volunteer at a lot of hostels and get room and board free, and then just basically be there for free. So I met a lot of people that were just doing that. You can cook most of your meals. There's so many ways to travel incredibly cheaply. And so like it was a bit of a flex to be like, oh, I don't need to cook my meals. I'd rather go out. Like not and yeah. And so I would say I didn't run into too many like entitled rich kids. I will say there's some areas, funny enough, not always Bali, but the same vibe. Like there's this cool lake in Guatemala called Lake Adelon, and it's like a yoga retreat area. And like you kind of get these people that are like they clearly think very highly of themselves, and like they're so cultured and worldly, you know. You get some of that. I will say I was asked probably several times if my parents were paying for my trip.
Yeah.
I think sometimes they maybe didn't realize my age or whatnot, or that like, you know, I had a whole career and like this is all self-funded and all of that. But that, because people I think don't often understand. Also in the US, we have the potential to have a lot of disposable income that doesn't exist everywhere in the world, even in first world countries. And so it's wild how much Americans will spend on travel. Yeah. like I was just in Hawaii for a business trip, and my goodness, like people will just spend $500 a night on a hotel. And that's like, you're like, oh, well, if I'm only going to go for a week a year, then you want to make it great. And that kind of makes sense to me. But that concept is so foreign to most of the world, even like first world, because they have so much more time off. They're like, well, I'm going to go all of August, of course, plus, you know, all of these other trips. And so like spending $500 a night on a hotel is like wild.
Yeah. No.
Well, they have so many more trips planned that they can't just, we're blowing all of our money because we have nothing else planned.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the end all be all of my trip for the year. It's 2 weeks out of the entire year. I'm going to go balls to the wall. Whereas everybody else is like, why would I spend $500 a night when I have 45 nights to spend?
You can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really good question, Christian. I didn't think about that.
No. And then the last one was, when you like told your family and friends of like, hey, I'm going to go peace out for 18 months. What was that reaction? Like, were people really happy? Were some people are like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard? Like, were people cool? Were they dicks? No.
Yeah. Well, I have to. So my parents are split. They could not be more different in personalities. And when I told my dad and when I told my mom, I got the opposite reactions. So, and keep in mind, I at this point was like in, you know, mid 30s. I had been just like gung-ho career wise. So like totally just sufficient,
Doing the
doing
millennial
doing
thing.
things more or less traditionally right, all that. So my parents, it's like it's good to get their thoughts, but at the same time, it's not something they're not bankrolling this for me, right?
Yeah, you don't
So I
need
told my dad-
permission.
Yeah. I told my dad, and he's like, Brooke, you just took 10 weeks off on a vacation. You need to work.
Uh
I was like, okay. And then I
huh.
told my mom, and she's like, you know what? You can do this because you're a doer and you can do it. And I was like, oh
Hell
my
yeah.
goodness. I was like, damn, what a pep talk.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was just night and day. Some of my friends thought that it was maybe a little impulsive, even though I actually ended up taking a long time to kind of like make this come to fruition. So not necessarily that impulsive, but I think it just wasn't common. Like to be honest, I didn't know anyone that had done something like this at that time. Now I've met a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And I realized and I've had people actually come to me and be like, I didn't know you could do that, and I kind of want to do it. Like, tell me more. But I think people thought I was just kind of crazy, and I'm sure they're right. But I'm so happy with this choice. Yeah.
Well, if doing what you love is crazy, then consider me Charles Manson. Because I'll tell you what, that's what it's all about. No, I went on a month. Me and my wife and best friend and his fiance went on a month-long trip to Europe about this time last year, actually.
Yeah.
And the stigma behind it was a 3-month process at work to get it approved.
Wow. Okay.
3 months to be gone a month.
Wow.
It was like, I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you that I'm going to be gone and you need to figure it out. But it took them 3 months to be like, okay, yeah, sure,
Wow.
you can just empty your PTO bank and then the rest is unpaid. It's like, it took you 3 months to say that? That's what I was going to do anyways. So it's just,
God
it is
bless
possible.
America.
Yes, it is possible. Just get past the stigma. Anything that you're doing that other people aren't doing or that they wish they could do is going to cause problems.
Yeah.
So
Totally. You
fuck
gotta
it.
ruffle some feathers, but then you can
That's what I'm
fly.
talking about. Exactly. Ruffle their feathers, collect them, and then you have wings to fly. That's the new. That's the new
Trying to
quote
sound
of the
all
podcast.
inspirational.
Yeah.
You can definitely make fun of me for that one.
That is excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so to go back to what I was originally going to say is we've talked a lot about your travels. It's been really, really enlightening, great stories. But I do have another question about like you personally within these travels that I was going to ask, which is what is the impetus or the thought behind? I think your Instagram, like, what is it? Your handle or whatever it is, like the bio or whatever says, just trying to be upside down all over the world. What is that? Because you do handstands like in all of your pictures. What is that about?
Yeah. I guess I should share my Instagram is brooke.meets.world. Has an E at the end, but I'm not an influencer. I thought I could become one, and then I realized it's way too much work.
Yeah.
And now I don't post very frequently. So
I don't know. I think influencer is a fancy word, but I listened to your episode on Zero to Travel, and I've been following you since that episode, and it made me want to have you on this podcast. So you influenced me to have you on this podcast. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm not like someone that's monetizing things or any of that. I figure I should share these photos with somebody, so I put them on there. But yeah, so I'm let's see, I was a gymnast, I was a cheerleader in college, and then I do like partner acrobatics and like acro yoga and things like that. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of doing handstands. Anytime I see like an open area, I like want to go do a handstand. And then I forget how it started. I just was like, I should do one in every country and get a photo. Yeah. And then now it's also just kind of like, oh, there's a cool thing. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. It's a beautiful place. Do I do a handstand here?
Yeah. It's also like a very flattering, like it's more flattering when you're doing a handstand than if you're just standing there.
That's true.
So
more impressive.
Selfie.
I ate a big lunch. I'll do a handstand. It'll look fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a fun little thing. And I forget a lot too. There's a couple of countries I missed and I'm like, oh, darn. But it's just kind of a fun thing to do. I really like to do acrobatic things and it's kind of a good a way to tie it into travel.
Well, it's interesting. It's like, I wonder what the meaning behind that is. So, okay. So it sounds like kind of a gymnastics background. And then also Am I right? You've done, is it 54 different countries?
I think I'm at 60 now.
Woo!
Wow.
So that's about 60 handstands across the world.
Yeah, a lot of handstands. Yeah, and I got, let's see, I have my next trip that I have booked. I'm actually going back to quite a few places, but I'll add one more new one.
Which
so,
is?
Switzerland.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Never been there before. Okay.
Yeah, it looks amazing. I met some really cool Swiss women when I was on that island, Socotra, and they live in Lugano, which is like so scenic. And I was planning on doing just a little Italy, a little France. I kind of want to do just eat. Like, I want to go eat.
Food tour.
But I haven't done Northern Italy, so I was like, I should see if I can visit them. So. So anyways, we'll hopefully check off Switzerland soon.
Yeah. And so after this trip, you did all these amazing things. How was it coming back to this? Was it like, were you ready, or were you like, when do I go again?
Yeah, I honestly kind of wanted to keep traveling a little bit longer because I could, but then this perfect job came open and it just was like the right thing, the right fit. I actually went back to Seattle. It was my first time doing an actual like sales job. Everything just kind of, the stars aligned, and I was like, this makes sense to go back. I will say I joke that I was just like so feral. Like I was so used to just being like out doing whatever and being around all these young people and nothing really mattering, and I shouldn't say nothing mattering, but like not having to be all like professional. And it took me a little while to like get back into this like corporate world, and even just, I don't know, just the US.
You're like, what
general.
do you mean I can't take a 2-hour lunch and have wine?
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know, this might be TMI, but like I was at a friend's barbecue and they had this intricate system to have to go to the bathroom. You had to like do one elevator down, go down a hallway, do another elevator, and then go like to their apartment or whatever. But they had an area where the dogs would go on this rooftop. And we'd been drinking a lot, and I was like, can I just go there? Like, why do I have to do all this? I gotta go. And then my friend's like, Brooke, please don't pee there. I was like, okay, fine.
I'll rub your nose in it. I will rub your nose in it.
Yes. Someone with a dog walks up and I'm like, I'm so happy I didn't do that. Why did I think that was an idea? Like, I just was like, it seemed like so easy, right? So just things like that. I felt like I had to like be like, back to reality. But then like on a more serious note, I think it was also hard because like nobody at home understood what I had just done. And I felt like my world had expanded so much. I learned so much about myself, about the world, just like how I think of the US too, we're kind of a pretty insular country, we kind of have our ways of doing things, and we're the best and this and that. And like seeing so many different ways of doing things, I felt like I just like my brain had just like expanded so much, but then no one could really understand where I was coming from, if that made sense. And I didn't want to talk about the trip too much. I didn't want to always be
you don't want to be the friend who's it's actually pronounced Barcelona.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, by the way, that's Christian. That's what Christian does.
Ibiza.
Ibiza.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually called Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha.
Yes, exactly. The Native American way to say it.
Yeah, so I was definitely trying to like, I didn't want to be that person. I already probably talk about Burning Man too much. So, like, you can only have one thing that you talk about too much, you know?
That's true.
And
not on this podcast. You can talk about anything you want. That's what we've discovered.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I could tell you guys about Burning Man, but you might have to do that blurry face and
see. What happens at Burning Man shall not be named on podcasts.
Exactly.
Were you the year where it rained? Were you at that?
Yes,
fiasco?
And that's the year I brought my mom.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So Mama Thayer is a trooper.
I would say so.
She took it in stride. My camp, we were a space camp, and it was like mostly queer men, and it was amazing, and they all loved my mom. And she just took it in stride. She was so awesome.
Yeah.
She just, because it was hardcore. I'm not gonna lie. It was, we were told to ration food and water, and it was a whole thing. So
Yeah, it is
we
so
survived.
remote. Like,
Yeah. It was wild. We had to get because we took a bus in and we had to we were able to, as long as we had people that would take our stuff back to Seattle, like our tents and whatnot. So we just had to get from like our camp to this road, which was like 6 miles away. But it was like a clay, and it was it would like stick to your shoes. There was basically no anything wheeled would get stuck. I saw so many like big trucks stuck. It was wild, and it was like people kept saying like, yeah, you just get to the road and there'll be a bus, and it felt like one of the like Walking Dead or something, like,
yeah,
on the other side of this things are going to be different. Like
6 miles from here.
We made it. We had to sleep in the airport in Reno, but we made it back to Seattle, and it was so yeah, she's just down to do stuff like that. So
that
she's
sounds like an amazing mom. Like,
I was going to say, she sounds like she has kind of over your lifetime has given you that confidence to like pull the trigger on a lot of this stuff. So it's very important to have that kind of support structure. So shout out to Mama Thayer.
Yeah, Kimbo Slice, that's her Burning Man name.
I love that.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I do not lose sight of that for sure. Yeah.
That's incredible. I have just a couple more questions, but I want to pass it to Christian if he has any others real quick.
No, go for it, buddy.
All right. So we are getting to that time, unfortunately. Realistically, we could probably go for
a half a day
hours.
Episode, but
yeah.
I've already heard complaints our episodes are too long at an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Me and David just like to talk.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's helpful when we have a guest who's open and has great stories. So I don't think we'll be getting any complaints about this episode, which is good.
We can wrap it at that. Is there a place where you've talked about your full journey that we could maybe point people towards if they want to know more about that, or maybe just look at your Instagram or anything like that?
I don't know. I've done a handful of like random interviews. I did one kind of, well, I guess it's not that recent, but it was Julian Johnsroot, I think it's called. Like, she's all about mini retirements, and I've done a few now. So I kind of outline a little bit more about like how I did it, what did I tell work, kind of what inspired that. I'd say my Instagram is where I try to post like highlights from travel. I am really bad about it. I will be honest. When you travel, like when I did that 18 months, it was like you just never stop taking pictures, and I think got burnt out with all of that a little. But I still love. I think when you take photos, you're actually like seeing the beauty of something and like the framing, and so I do love to take pictures. So I do post on there, but not a ton. But yeah, Instagram is probably the best way to find me and kind of see any of the travel and adventures and whatnot.
Could you shout out your
handle?
Have, like,
a book or a memoir or something.
Yeah. Could you shout out your Instagram handle and maybe spell it out so people can find it?
Yes. So it's BROOKE.MEETS.WORLD. Just Brooke Meets World. Brooke.meets.world.
We'll put it in
a little bit of a shout out for us millennials who watch Boy Meets World.
Yes.
So that's how you can find me.
Perfect.
And highly recommend. Great follow, great pictures. Honestly, really fun to travel around with you on those photos. I guess we'll end it with these last two questions, which is, so you're what we call on this show a roamer, like myself, born in Seattle, moved all around, and now you're in Minneapolis, right? But because you're a roamer, I'm always curious, what do you think your life would have looked like had you stayed where you, like, in your hometown? What do you think that would look like?
Yeah.
For your life personally?
It'd be interesting. There's plenty of career opportunities in the Seattle area. So, or even in Kirkland, if I wanted to stay there. My mom is still in Kirkland. My grandma's still in Kirkland. So I could see a world staying there. And actually I did spend a couple of years living there post that big trip. I only moved to Minneapolis a year ago. And so I could actually see it. But I think for me, I think I was so caught up in, it was sort of like a keeping up with the Joneses mentality because it was such a kind of, fancy pants place. And
Mhm.
I think I would have been a lot more caught up in like, oh, I can't have any, roots in my hair
Yeah.
and I must have the nails done and all like stuff that I am not
Yeah.
really that good
Yeah.
about. Despite being a pharma sales rep, you'd think I would have that figured out.
Wait,
but
you're
no.
telling me the woman who was about to pee on the dogs, Matt, isn't maybe the best about keeping up with appearance?
Shocker, right?
I only
Oh,
say
shit.
that because I'm the same way. When you're telling that story, I was like, I would have peed on the dog, Matt.
I would have peed on the dog rug too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't seem that. Also, like, keep in mind, this was many drinks into the night. In my defense.
Was this like in like downtown, like a nice building in downtown Seattle, or?
It was in a nice building in West Seattle, which is kind of like not downtown, but like still nice, very nice area.
Yeah, a place where
Mhm.
you shouldn't be peeing where the dog.
Yeah, like the woman that walked up with her probably $4,000 Labradoodle right when I decided not to do that.
Mhm.
Well, at my friend's suggestion, my friend that lived there.
Yeah. Please don't pee.
Yeah.
I have to live here.
I have to see these people. It's like on camera.
That is brilliant.
Pretty bad. But yeah, I think if I was to stay in Kirkland, I just feel like I might have been a little bit caught up in things that I now am just like, I feel like my world is much bigger than things like that. And no shame to anyone who likes to get their nails done at all.
Yeah.
I think I would just get kind of caught up in more of the little things.
Mhm.
And I think now I have a much better sense of like the big picture. And if there's something I don't like about a place or whatnot, like I know I can just move. I know I could move to another country. I know that I can do all of these things, and there's not just one way to do things. I can do it however I want, based on what I've learned just around. So yeah, I don't know. I could see a world where I stayed, but I also am happy to have the experience of like living in other areas. I'm still yet to live abroad, although I'm hoping that will be a thing, maybe some point in the future.
I think you'll check that off the list sooner than you think.
Yeah.
But that answer kind of ties in directly with the last question that I always like to ask our fellow roamers, which is, given all of your travel experiences, given that you're a roamer, let's put all of the money, all of the everything aside. There's nothing else that exists except for you and this question. So put all that aside. If you could live anywhere on Earth, where do you think that would be?
Ooh, that is a really good question.
I get one an episode.
You do.
I'm practical to a fault, and so sometimes I have a hard time kind of taking away like, oh, well, the visa is not possible.
That's the hard part. Yeah, you got to take all that away.
Okay. Okay, so I'd say this. I'd say I have a list.
Okay.
Well, I can go through it quickly.
Let's do it.
Granada, Spain.
Ooh,
is amazing.
I've heard amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. It's right next to the Sierra Nevada mountains, so ski in the winter, stays kind of temperate in the summer.
And actually, it's España. Just saying.
España?
Yes.
Sorry, I had to.
Yeah, I gotta work on my lisp.
Okay, so Granada.
Yes, they have free. You go to like, I want to say bars, but they probably have a fancier term for it. And you order drinks, and they bring you free tapas.
Oh my God! Yes. I think I saw that on.
Alhambra is there also in Game of Thrones. Just incredible. Just absolutely. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Porto, Portugal. Lisbon's amazing too, but I'm a Pacific Northwest girly, and so it's a little too hot for me in Lisbon. Porto is like, oh, it's incredible. It's so scenic. It's right on this river, across the river from the whole town is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Across the river, they have all these. They're like wineries, but for port wine, and Portuguese are so friendly. It's just they're warm and
also one of the easiest places to get a visa as an American.
Yes, they have a very good visa to get. So that's on the short list for sure. The Netherlands in general,
Mm-hmm.
while not maybe as scenic, although Amsterdam's gorgeous. I'll
Yeah.
say I haven't traveled all around the country, and I would want to do that first. But I like the open-mindedness of it. Like, fun fact, they give a tax break to folks that have some kind of disability so that they can see sex workers.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because they recognize that, like, well, that's kind of a human
Yeah.
need,
Interaction.
and
Yeah.
with this disability, it might be harder. And so, like, I'm just like, maybe that's the San Francisco mindset in me.
It's
like,
very forward thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
but I just think that's like they really care about their people,
Yeah.
and there's this level of directness that can come across as rude when you're not used to it as an American, but like you don't have to guess what they're thinking; they'll tell you, and it's kind of refreshing. Oh well, okay, Wellington, New Zealand.
Ooh.
Oh,
Super
okay.
cool. I mean, New
Yeah.
Zealand is amazing. You're a bit isolated because you're far from everything, but like, oh my gosh, the nature is incredible, and the people they have a very polite culture as well. Just really kind people, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, Wellington is just kind of this cool, like, little alternative city, but there's still like a lot of companies and whatnot there, and yeah, just super cool. And then if I could play, world politics and take all wars and things
Mhm.
away, I loved Lviv in Ukraine.
Oh.
I thought it was
Yeah.
beautiful and very walkable. Just this really special place.
That is
Wow.
that is awesome. That's a great list.
That
I
is
could
a
probably
good
keep
list.
going all day long, but those
Yeah.
are some
Yeah.
that I've kind of thought about more seriously. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great couple of answers, and I hope to see at some point here soon that you have moved to one of those places. And when and if that is the case, we'd love to have you back on to discuss what life is like out there.
Yeah. All right. Well, now it sounds like I got some homework to do.
Yeah.
Yes. So get on it.
Yes.
We're all relying on you.
Up and you're live again. That's actually easier. That's not even bad thing to say of
Yeah.
go move because you've done it.
Yeah. Yeah. So once again, give her a follow if you're interested at all in any sort of travel or solo travel. If you're a fan of handstands, it's just a great follow all around at brooke.meets.world. And as always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Triple R. And bye.
Bye.